stairs. Do not run on the stairs.
Perfect. All right.
Okay. All right. Sharon, or whoever wants to issue the date for the
6:05
Recording
July
in
28th,
progress.
2022 Planning Commission meeting.
All right, welcome everyone. Matt, appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us. I'm going to go out on the limb since we've got a couple folks that are not here and say we're going to let's push off the election of officers to the next session. Does anybody have any concerns about taking that approach?
You guys all motioned to just keep bouncing it until you had a full commission at the last meeting.
Yep, and just going to acknowledge that it's there. So
Okay, thanks.
Next item we're going to hit is the public comments. Does anybody have anything that they want to present to us that's not on the agenda at this point?
You have the audience.
Paula?
No, I don't have any comments. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just wanted to call out that Peter Parkinson submitted some comments for the draft regulations. He didn't know if you were going to open up for conversations tonight. He knew about the meeting, so he might pop in. But again, that's just a FYI if you guys do dive in tonight, and you should all receive the list. Thanks.
Okay, with that, Matt, again, thank you for joining us this evening. You guys have been in the news a lot lately, and you had some really interesting stuff, what I saw, and take it away. Show us what you've done.
Well, thanks for having me, and it has been quite a process. It's pretty much dominated our long range work plan for the last 2 years to work toward the hearing draft of the form-based code for Taft Corners, along with other miscellaneous zoning edits to fit it in, and a official map, which underpins, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So really brief overview. As you might imagine and probably know from history in Williston, the town has struggled with what to do in regards to land use in Taft Corners ever since it became a popular place to do something other than have a dairy farm. And really the development of Exit 12 and suburban expansion of the greater Burlington area dating back, probably for Williston, really to the mid 1960s, has played out in Taft Corners in the form of the sort of developed form you see there now, beginning with big box stores, the gigantic battle over the proposed Pyramid Mall that ultimately resulted in the development of Maple Tree Place. And over the last probably 15 years or so, sort of a second wave of development related to more residential and mixed use build out in the Finney Crossing and more recently Cottonwood Crossing projects. So that's 50 years of land use in Williston in 35 seconds, leading to where we are today. And a 2017 Williston town plan that said, continue to monitor the performance of the zoning we have in Taft Corners, and also consider changing it and consider using form-based code specifically to continue to try to achieve the goals that have been stated in Williston Town's plans going back to at least 1990, that Taft Corners become a downtown type environment with a strong pedestrian orientation. I think it actually says design conscious downtown with a strong pedestrian orientation. So walkable with buildings and sites that look good. And we've had, as you might imagine, a lot of citizen feedback over many years in response to new development, especially that sort of second wave residential mixed use development from people in the town, that it's not completely meeting expectations in terms of the quality of building design, some of the ways that sites are laid out, or the way that different sites sort of work or don't work with one another. So we wanted to do a project that would, consider the zoning tool, consider the idea of using form-based code to get a better grip on design of sites and buildings in town, but also really back out and look at those longstanding big picture goals that Williston has had to take, all of the development interest in Taft Corners and channel it into something that could truly become a vibrant, downtown-like or town center, urban village as long envisioned. So we started this project with a budget conversation with our select board going back to, I'd say late 2019, early 2020. I'm not screen sharing yet, Darren. I see it in the chat. I'll pop up some images soon so it's more fun to look at. I can.
We didn't miss it.
No, you're not missing it. In fact, while I'm talking here, I'll go ahead and share and just leave it on the My Taft Corners page. I'm just going to use my web browser. And mytaftcorners.com has been the digital home for this project throughout. So this is the cover page if you go there. So we had a budget conversation with the select board about the idea of funding this project and putting some money aside to go in with a really strong case to do a match against the CCRPC Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP system, to partner with CCRPC on this project. As you might imagine, like most towns, the planning department budget in Williston's not one of the bigger ones, and it's not one that typically asks for a lot of money. But when we spoke to the select board about what we wanted to try to achieve in Taft Corners and why, they did ultimately vote to get that into the FY21 budget, spanning into FY22 to take on this project. And the why, beyond just saying, we've wanted Taft Corners to be a design conscious, walkable downtown forever, and we don't feel like we're quite there. The other whys for why to take on this project at this point in the town's history, there's a couple. One is we were seeing this residential demand, even in 2019 and 2020. I think just looking at vacancy rates and knowing that there would continue to be interest in residential build out in Taft Corners, seeing the rise of e-commerce and having a couple of empty big box stores in town at various times led to some concerns about how that built environment might evolve over time and what could the town do in its land use standards to make that better. And also really feeling like, if you look at the image, right, it just passed. I'll talk about Trader Lane a little while later, but the idea that the town and private landowners and others, including state of Vermont, might partner on the construction of new infrastructure in the area, including Trader Lane, which, if you know Taft Corners, would extend from the side of the Hannaford supermarket to where Texas Roadhouse is on Williston Road, providing another way in and out of that part of Taft Corners. And that's a Cirque Highway Alternatives project. The state would be on the hook for the intersection with Route 2, but the town and private interests would need to come up with the rest of the money. So looking at something that ballpark might be a $4 million infrastructure investment that would unlock the potential of quite a lot of land in this area. And having had about 12, 13 years experience with the current zoning, some concern that current zoning, if that land use, if those lands were made more desirable for development, that code might not result in development pattern that met the town's expectations for Taft Corners. So that was the case we laid out to the select board. They said, yep, let's go for it. We put together a unified planning work program application. And in the beginning of fiscal 21, we went out with a request for proposals to do a form-based code, but to do that with a really pretty significant public process as the lead in. In other words, we're not just going to tell somebody what code to write for us and what the standard should be. We're going to start with really like almost a mini comprehensive plan process, doing the Taft Corners vision. So I'll just pop over if I can get the right cover. Here we go. And this is on the website. This was the vision plan that came out of our public process. This being 2021, mostly March and April and May of 2021. A lot of our process was online. And this document both contains the visualizations and drawings that came out of that process, as well as a record of the process that we went through. So we talk about the various tools we used, interactive maps, online meetings, Mentimeter polling, visual preference surveys, et cetera, and what kind of feedback we got from that. These are some of the documents related to the breakout groups that we held during the Charrette Week. We also had a consultant team that was carrying out technical meetings with stakeholders and major landowners in the area, as well as other town departments, of course, fire, public works, especially as it related to this project. And what came out of the vision at the end was a presentation that included a lot of graphics that look like the one I'm paused on here, drawing in what kind of new development in what sort of pattern might happen in Taft Corners. My cursor, if you can see it, is over that Trader Lane alignment. This is Wright Avenue. I'm hovering over CVS right now, if you're familiar where that is on Route 2A. So starting to think about, well, if we had a little more infrastructure and a little more development, and we had a code that did some really kind of basic things, that put buildings up on the street, that put parking behind buildings, and didn't put parking up on the street, and that contained some design criteria, what would that start to look like as it built out? And also, what would it look like if we started thinking about where our green spaces might go and how we might plan for those? So there was a lot of feedback from citizens that Taft Corners should be a place, especially if lots more people are going to live there, that has pretty good accessibility to parks and green spaces, and that there's some feeling of connectivity between those spaces. So that was part of the drawings that came out of that vision plan. In the background behind the development of this plan, we gave our consultant team every single piece of information we had at the town level about where things were. So existing building footprints, road right-of-way, utility layouts, everything we could put together to help our consultant team develop something that was really well informed and was really grounded in reality and at a scale that actually matched the existing conditions out there. We did have some three-dimensional visualizations done. This is if you were to stand facing north and had the side wall of the Hannaford supermarket to your right, and you were looking down the future alignment of Trader Lane. So down here in the small image 1, that's the current condition. If you took this left over here, you'd be in the Bed Bath & Beyond parking lot. And then imagining the construction of Trader Lane, the Cirque alternative road we're thinking about, in this case, envisioned with a central green with some one-way vehicle circulation around it, and then the buildings coming in under what the code might call for. So these visualizations were part of this vision plan. So most of this was presented to the community in May and June of 2021. The Planning Commission made some adjustments to some of it. And ultimately, we brought this to the Select Board in July of 2021 saying, okay, here's a vision plan that the Planning Commission's comfortable with, and comfortable, if they have a thumbs up from the Select Board, with going forward, working with the consultant to develop a land use code that would make this stuff happen. So that's the vision. Beyond that, I think I'll just go real quickly to the product. So starting in the fall of 2021, we started working on a draft code. By, I think, late October of 2021. We were most of the way through, actually, I'm sorry, by 2022, I may have my dates wrong. We were through initial code drafting. Yes, and by January of 2023, most recently, we were on our way with a planning commission hearing. So a little bit about our form-based code. You'll hear these terms a lot when you talk to people about form-based codes. It is based on a regulating plan. So rather than a map of zoning where these areas might each be covered with a different color overlay, we have existing and planned new street layouts that have a color, and that color corresponds to a building form standard. So red, darker orange, lighter orange, light yellow. Those are the sub designations, the four different building form standards that you would see. And you can see on this regulating plan, we are also identifying some green spaces. There's a few other distinctions here, some hatched streets that would not be required to be created as part of new development right away because maybe they run through an existing building or otherwise would be, further out in the future beyond the horizon of this plan. But if you want to know under the Williston form-based code what kind of building you can build and how it needs to work on the site, you want to go to the regulating plan and look at your street frontages. That's how you're going to know where to look in the code to figure out what kind of building you can build. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the map. It would take you into the building form standards chapter of the code. And this is a little diagram about the way the code works. It's generally going to have a line that says this is where the building needs to be placed. It's going to have another line that's back from the street that says parking can't go between this line and the street. Pretty much the build to line in our code is 5 to 7 feet off the street. And the parking setback is generally 30 feet off the street. So strong feedback from the planning commission consultant team. Don't put parking lots right up on streets. Generally encourage them to be back behind the building. And then the building form standard is also going to talk about how tall of a building, how deep of a building, and how large of a building and footprint you can have in each of these districts. And a little bit about a few other aspects of building. And then there's a separate chapter for actual architectural standards. So these colors correspond to the colors on map, the most intense being town center and storefront. Storefront is just like town center, except we require the bottom story to be a retail capable story that could be shop front. And in this entire code, the only place where that mixed use building is required is about 600 feet of Wright Avenue next to CVS. So most of this code, although we like mixed use and want to see it, in most of this code area, if you want to build all residential, you can. The Planning Commission was really interested in trying to bring some focus because we are dealing with a large area, about 980 acres. That won't all build out at once. It will build out in the vision. We're thinking this is, an 80-year build out. How do you get some cohesiveness? It's going to come in a little bit piecemeal, and you're probably going to undermine things if you want mixed use everywhere. In fact, our market study that was part of this code said there's just not enough demand for retail to ask for that much. So that's that storefront frontage. We drop down, there's a transitional neighborhood frontage, and then the least intense is what's called strollable neighborhood. This is almost more of a row home standard. So you looked on the map, you saw the color of your street frontage. This explains how that required building line and parking setback work. There are some requirements that if you've got a corner, you need to occupy that corner with the building, don't leave it empty. Couple other things that are fun because of the way Taft Corners was laid out. We have a lot of curvy streets. So we had to have some special rules for not having to go right up on the required building line where it had a curve. So generally you can have straight sections of a building, I think typically 60 feet maximum. You can go 60 feet and just touch the corners with the curve, but otherwise have a straight facade. There's some special things to think about if we have a parcel that goes all the way through and how we might handle that. Generally, the goal here is to fill up the street with building or something, so that that streetscape, the outdoor room that's created by a good streetscape that makes it really walkable, is continuous. But there will be times there's gaps between buildings, and we do have a street wall requirement there, so that there's still something enclosing that space. Some other things about parking: we have that parking setback, but if you're mostly underground, you can be forward of it. Just some other things here that talk about, if you're building structured parking, and just a few other things about how jogs in the building can be handled and things like that. We talk a lot in the building form standard about windows, fenestration. This is all about what's happening on the street. We really don't have a lot of requirements for this or architecture once we're not on the street, but on the street facing facade, there's going to be a minimum percentage of windows. There's going to be a minimum spacing of, or rather a maximum spacing, minimum number of doors on the street. So strong desire here from the Planning Commission to have buildings that have a relationship to the street that they're on. And we have a couple of things that are allowed to stick out ahead of that required building line, like ADA ramps, awnings, bay windows, balconies, etc. So these things can come right out and touch the right of way. Little bit more about building height. This is kind of an interesting Williston thing. Building height is always talked about in stories with a height above clear sidewalk elevation. That's the maximum, but an attic story is generally allowed above that and can be occupied. We do have both minimum and maximum roof pitch. The Planning Commission, in a quest to try to come up with something that might be a little more unique or interesting about Taft Corners, wanted to build in somewhat of an incentive to try out pitched roof configurations. It's not an absolute requirement. You don't have to have a pitched roof for any portion of a roof that you're using to hold mechanical equipment. Also, if you want to do a flat roof building, you can do that as long as you make that flat roof solar ready and show us that you could put solar panels up there if you wanted to, stopping kind of one step short of actually requiring solar on a flat roof. So there were some energy concerns that went into the decisions on this as well. Some couple special rules for civic buildings. They get to do some other things. Couple things about not putting super tall stuff right smack across the street from stuff that's not super tall. So having to step back when we're running into row homes or single family residential. And that's about it on building form. Then you go and look up the actual standard for the color you've got on the map. We have a lot of pictures here. These are statements of intent, but not outright statements of policy. And then what our consultant calls a little bit tongue-in-cheek, the tofu diagrams, because they look like cubes of tofu. But these just show how you can use the build-to line and the parking setback and the maximum depth line in different ways to create different buildings within the same standard. So there's a couple different ways that somebody can do that. And then you get a special diagram for each one explaining what the building form standard regulates. Again, you've got street right of way, generally a 5 to 7 foot deep dooryard, which could be hardscape or green. Then you've got your building build-to line, the parking setback. We do also have a private open area requirement. This is 15% of the building footprint. It has to be provided as private open area. It doesn't have to be all one chunk of private open area. You can put some in a rooftop garden. You can put some into street facing balconies or put some on the ground. There's a few minimums in there, but in addition to the sort of master planned green space throughout the district, there's this idea of buildings and sites should provide some private open areas as well. So then you just go through, where do I need to put the building? How big can I make the building? How long can I make the building? And how small can I make the building, etc. So really, really basic dimensional stuff in the building form. After that, you'd go take a look at the architectural standards. These are generally applicable throughout. We talk about materials. We talk about materials you are and are not allowed to use. We talk about what we want to see on the tops of buildings a lot in terms of, parapets and, things that make roofs look nicer, et cetera. Again, these are statements of intent, but then you're going to see the requirements. Roof pitch, overhang requirements for roofs, standards for windows and doors. The big one is requiring some level of recessing of the windows into the facade surface. We have a lot of new buildings in Williston that people have reacted really negatively to that are very, very flat with the windows, just completely flush to the wall, and often the entire building then taking on a real boxy shape that people reacted very negatively to. We threw a Vermont window in there in case anybody figures out a way to do that in Taft Corners, just because it would be kind of cool. I don't know if that will happen on an urban building with a pitched roof, but it would be interesting. And just some rules about if you're doing that shop front configuration, you can do the classic shop front that dents in away from the build to line, and some examples of shop front configurations that the Planning Commission thought were good ones for people to kind of shoot for. Talked a lot about awnings with the Planning Commission and wanting to encourage them, but the right kind and the kind that would actually provide a little shelter over the door and provide some visual interest. And just a little bit about having regular layout of windows. So generally windows need to be aligned with one another in a sort of a regular, fairly traditional pattern. I think throughout both building form and architecture, when the Planning Commission was asked to make choices, they tended toward a sort of a less modern looking style. Not that these buildings will look fake historic, but a lot of the elements sort of pull towards a very sort of regular style. So then we talk about, places where you don't have a building on the build to line and you need to do a street wall. And we have just some pictures and examples of some different types of street walls, ones that are landscaped, ones that might include a gate to provide access, all of that kind of stuff. Lot of interest in encouraging porches and stoops, things that make especially residential properties really interactive with the street. A little bit about lighting, a little bit about keeping mechanical away from the public realm and screening it appropriately when it has to be somewhere near the public realm. So the X through the picture is we don't want that. So here's a street facing kind of an alley, but all the mechanical's just been put there in a way where it's not screened. We talk a little bit about exterior lighting, a little bit about signage. The main rule on signage here is appropriately integrated with the building with a little bit of guidance around window signs. Signs should go in a sign band on the building. They should look like they belong there. Flynn Theater in there. And that's it on architecture. So, I want to go back out for a second to the regulating plan map. Back out so we can see the whole Taft Corners here. It feels like a lot in this code. There's a lot of things to read through. But our experience has been when we sit down with an architect who's got a particular site in the district, who's just sitting down with staff for the first time and says, I just want to know what I might be able to do if this new code was adopted. that initial conversation is usually about an hour. And we follow that process of looking at where the site is on the map, looking at what building placement is required by the form standard, and then generally answering a few questions back and forth about the particulars of architecture, especially, can I use this material? Can I use that material? That kind of stuff. And those conversations have demonstrated to me, who may eventually have to administer this whole thing, that we're on the right track. It is logical and explainable to somebody who, you know, knows a few things about how to build a building. You can get to some conclusions about whether what they want to do would work or not pretty quickly. So I just want to mention, and then I think we should just go wherever you folks want to go in terms of answering questions. The regulating plan as part of this adoption package is also underpinned by an official map. The official map is townwide, but it's mostly focused on Taft Corners in terms of where there's the greatest degree of detail. And the streets you see on this proposed official map are the same streets that are on the regulating plan. So we are really setting up a system here where the town is kind of taking the reins about how street infrastructure will be built and will be placed in Taft Corners going forward. And you know, if you look at this map, I think particularly under my cursor here in the area where the Hamlet, Finney Crossing, Chelsea Commons, and Mansfield Place, and a few other ownerships have all kind of interacted and developed over about a 30-year track. You know, we have some streets that line up, but we have some geometry that maybe makes sense with property lines, but doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise, and you know, leads to some real compromises. This is a tough place to make new development work. We're reviewing a pretty big project up here right now under the current bylaw called the Annex. And, you know, in our heart of hearts, we wouldn't want these 3 blocks down here to just all kind of end in this street at the back. We'd want to get into this other grid, but we've got an existing development pattern that makes it really hard. So when we look at areas that are not very developed yet, like the perimeter lands around Cottonwood Crossing, or some of the undeveloped land over in the Taft Corners Park area, we're proposing an official map that really dictates where the streets go so that they will align with one another. And so that they will have that opportunity to create that 300 to 400 foot dimension walkable block pattern that's really going to be the backbone of what's developed under this plan. So complete form-based code for Taft Corners, underpinned by an official map. As you see on the official map, it's about where the streets go. It's also about where the green spaces go. And the intent here is to ultimately create publicly owned and managed park spaces within Taft Corners. Right now, the town of Williston owns almost 0 land in the Taft Corners area. And we're really relying on our existing development standards to incentivize or encourage the creation of private green space. And we've really had varying success on that. So again, doing something that's quite a bit more assertive under this code. And I guess the only other thing I want to mention that I didn't is that between these 2 maps, you don't see them on here, but in the building form standard and the other development standards, it is essentially mandatory when you're developing in any of these blocks that you create an alley, and that the alley is how you access that parking that happens to the rear of the site. It's where the utilities are going to go. It's where trash and loading docks are going to go, et cetera. So we didn't draw the alleys in on the regulating plan because we're not dictating their orientation. But the other thing that really makes these streetscapes go is trying to not cut them up with a lot of curb cuts and driveways and utilities and trash and access to private parking, et cetera, but rather consolidate that access on each block to an alley. So Darren, I think I want to stop there because that's a ton. And have you folks maybe ask some questions that fill in some of the blanks here. And we can kind of go from there.
Sounds great, Matt. I'll start by turning it over to Dusty.
So thanks, Darren. Matt, again, thank you. This is after going through a few years of work in our town center, this is all like very familiar, discussion points. I would say that it feels like you guys took it 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 steps beyond what we did. But it feels, I don't know, it's like a planner's dream, I think. One question I had is, we struggled with form-based code because getting acceptance and so forth of this. How has the reception from both developers and I know you talked a little bit about this, but the public in general to prescribing this before anybody brings anything forward?
Sure. Well, it's certainly challenging. And I'll sort of answer it in 2 parts. So from the public, I think the biggest challenge we have is a negative reaction to any additional allowed building height. So this code does allow, in its most intense places, a 5-story building with a 6th story attic story on top of it. The most you can really get in Williston right now is 4 stories. And I would say even internally with the Planning Commission that the group struggled about where to go with building height, but really wanted to put forward a plan that had the greatest chance of providing an opportunity for some affordable housing to come in and some abundance of housing to come in. So that's where they landed. I'm still waiting for the select board to tell me if they want to make a change in response to that public comment. In other words, reduce allowed height a little bit or add a maximum number or a maximum foot height limit regardless of story count. There's a bunch of ways we can do that. And it's really just a question of does the select board want to do that in response to that comment? But it's just, it's hard to think about tall buildings being built. I get it.
Yeah, that's yeah. Commissioners, anybody have any questions? Tom?
No questions, but I would say that it looks very well thought out. Very nice.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
I do.
We'll get there. Patty, you're up.
Okay. Are you ready? I got a couple. I read your whole plan and thought it was outstanding. So my questions are, what changed the paradigm, your paradigm from conventional zoning that deals with, at least in Essex, with prescriptive land uses to form-based code and your public realm standards which are outstanding among your new regulations? What made you change the paradigm? Was it the developers? Was it the public? Was it a little both? Tell me your take.
I think mostly the public and the Planning Commission. And I mean, you folks all know this as planners and commissioners, that planning touches everything, and you pull on one string and the whole sweater starts to unravel. And while what we initially sort of started from was really working with the Planning Commission, talking from a staff level, because we're the same staff that staffs the DRB, so we know with current development where the compromises have been made and where the challenges have kind of revealed themselves. And there's a lot to like in Williston's current zoning. It wants people to pull buildings up to streets, but it doesn't prohibit you from also then building a parking lot on the street, for example. It is a design review district, but the design review criteria are challenging to administer. My favorite one to pick on is the one that says, use a variety of colors and materials, but with restraint. You know how fun that is to debate at the DRB at about 10:45 at night? You know, so we were able to go walking around with the planning commission and then our consultant and just give those kind of live examples from the staff perspective of saying, well, here's this building that people are giving us challenging feedback about. And here's it's there, it complied with our current bylaw, and here's how it got there, and here's where the compromises were made, and here's where things were challenging. So that part we kind of knew we were going to do. We know there's a housing crisis. We knew that going in. We know there's a changing retail environment and a moribund office market coming in, and that those sort of things were not likely to fill in the whole area. And we knew we were going to make infrastructure investments. But I think what we didn't really know going in was once we saw the vision plan and started thinking about, well, what's it really going to take to make that plan happen? We need really the most assertive way possible of saying this is where the streets need to go. Well, that in Vermont, that's official map. And sort of fortuitously, we had actually started working on an official map for the town about a year and a half before we jumped into the form-based code project, mostly thinking about sidewalks, paths, and trails, and coming out of some other challenges we had of coordinating and aligning those kinds of facilities as new developments came in for review. We had an ad hoc mobility committee that had worked on that. We were able to sort of, you know, looking at that vision plan and saying, you know, this really ought to have the official map underneath it. That was just, you know, kind of serendipitous. And I guess the takeaway lesson is just do good planning in all dimensions all the time. And sometimes those efforts will align with one another. So we were able to pull that official map in. The other thing I think that was a little bit of a surprise is that when you look at a place like this and you look at that vision plan and you see those walkable, pleasant streets to be on, we identified pretty quickly coming out of that, well, that doesn't really match our current public works standard specifications. The kinds of streets we would want to have in Taft Corners, we're going to need to update those specs. And we actually have a separate project going to create the engineering drawings that are necessary for the specs to identify that. And I should, let me see if I can grab my public realm chapter real quick about streets. I don't know if I have the map on this page. I might forgive my scrolling for a second. I'm just going to have to grab this map to show you. But the other thing the Planning Commission really wanted was for biking and walking facilities to align with one another in Taft Corners. And so this map, again, it looks like the official map. It looks like the regulating plan. But what these colors correspond to is the type of street in the public realm chapter that is desired for that street. So whether it's a rebuild of an existing street or a new street, this code actually doesn't just say, well, you need a street for your development. It says you need this street for your development. And if everybody were to build to this, for example, this sort of bright green path that goes and connects the four quadrants, I believe that's the street section that has a cycle track all the way around. So you could be on a separated facility on a bike and you could touch all four quadrants of Taft Corners. So some of this honestly was inspired by that visioning process and coming back to it and saying, you know, it's not just zoning that's going to get us there. You know, the Planning Commission from when the vision was developed in the spring to when they brought it to the select board in late summer, a lot of what they did was write a transmittal memo that said, we know there's some outstanding issues here. There's some other things that are going to need to happen to make this plan go, and things that we're concerned about going forward.
But how did the landowners and the developers that actually own the land, if Williston doesn't own any land, how do they accept your new paradigm?
Not entirely. So, the major developers, major landowners in this area, I can summarize the feedback a couple of ways. Most would like to see a regulating plan that creates more developable area. There are places in this plan, I'll use this map, but like here's a proposed street circling out around Cottonwood Crossing. It's a whole street that only has development allowed on one side. Part of that is we're falling off into some constrained lands with some wetlands down here. Part of that is a strong desire on the part of people in the town to maintain some view sheds to the mountains. This street would provide a facility that people could walk and bike along and have those views. There's also some gaps in the buildable blocks in these purple areas. Those are green spaces that create those sort of keystone shaped view sheds. So, when you hand a landowner a map and say, this is what we're thinking of allowing you to do and requiring you to do, there's going to be some resistance to that. And I think we saw that both major landowners south of Route 2, so Omega Realty, Al Senecal, and Jeff Davis, Taft Corners Associates, reacted, pretty strongly to that.
Question. One.
Yeah.
Statistically, because I deal with statistics, I used to. This is a great plan. If you kept track and actually not just with public input, but just your vision, and stick to your goals and stick to it, regardless of what developers say, you could statistically prove that this is successful. And I would almost say not just in Vermont, but nationally. If you had your consultant help you with the statistical analysis, I bet it would be statistically significant.
Well, we're certainly hoping for that. And I just grabbed I went back to the front page of the My Taft Corners. There's a map I'm hoping comes up in a second. I'll shout it out there it is. That's dollar value per acre in Williston. And so the big tall spires are the residential buildings in Finney Crossing. Dense residential creates a whole ton of grand list value on not a lot of acreage. And that's one way of looking at it. There are other ways of looking at it too. For some of the citizenry of Williston, the question was asked at one of the hearings, well, what if we adopt this and it's so strict and nobody builds anything? And it's like, well, first off, there's a whole bunch of people in town who have been telling me that they don't want to see anything more be built. They'll be really thrilled. But realistically, I think, that would lead us to adjust and think about what was creating the challenge and was there a solution that was palatable? Back to any of these maps for a minute. I like to think of the official map as a little bit of a wish list. This is what a walkable block pattern could look like in Taft Corners. It's probably not the only way to do it. And the only thing I can guarantee anybody is Taft Corners will not build out perfectly like it's shown on this map. Things will change. We'll find constraints we didn't know about. Preferences will change. But what official map says is this is a regulatory map. And if you want to change it, you need to go to the Planning Commission and you need to go to the Select Board. And so there's been some developer resistance to that idea of having to go talk about street and green space layout with the Planning Commission and the Select Board. And the feedback has been, can't we just make this a DRB waiver process? And our answer is no, because an official map is a piece of the zoning bylaw. So you functionally cannot. And then a little more sort of philosophically, this is big stuff. And it's the kind of stuff that I firmly believe the elected officials should be involved in. And I've sort of, we called this out when in back in January of 22, as we were getting this draft going to the Planning Commission, and we sort of realized the set of tools that were going to be necessary to put together here, we went to the select board with a sort of an update and said, here's the things that are going to cause the most friction for you as a board. You're going to hear about building height. We're struggling with it. The community is going to struggle with it. You're going to hear about official map and regulating plan because this is really prescriptive. And do you select board, this is us talking 6 months ago, do you understand that this might mean that you're having people come to you talking about how they want to lay things out in Taft Corners? And we had nodding heads. Now, some of them might be thinking, well, maybe I won't have to be here for all of that. It's so far off in the future. But this really puts the town, I believe, in the strongest position a municipality in Vermont can be in to control its destiny in terms of the development of a place like this that's going to depend so heavily on how streets are laid out.
So, Matt, question for you before I see if anybody else in the room wants to ask anything, staff or whatever. You know, where you got a street layout that you're putting on the map. We've had continual discussions with developers about, you know, when do they put the street in versus the development versus the street and so forth. So what have your discussions been around how to get the actual streets in? Because if somebody wanted to develop a small portion, like the parcel you showed us where there's housing on one side, that's a small portion of the streetscape. But how would you be looking to manage that build out?
I think a lot of it would probably happen about a block at a time or a half block at a time. So what we get into is, you know, if you want to build on the frontage, you need to build the street to have the frontage, right? So at a minimum, you've got to be stubbing in some of your street. And probably for one single building on a 300-foot block, you're not going to be able to just build the street where it would be in front of that building because there's no way to turn around. You're probably going to need to come around and connect to something. So I think what we're likely to see in those cases where it's brand new development is sort of a slow extension out from the existing streets, to the extent that whatever you build has some way of turning a vehicle around because it connects to another street or it at least wraps around into an alley or something like that. So, you know, in Williston's current public works specifications, the only way you're allowed to terminate a street is either in another street or in a gigantic cul-de-sac. We're not planning to build a lot of cul-de-sacs here.
So the first developer in the door might have to foot a larger portion of the bill potentially due to the infrastructure that might have to be laid down before they can do much of anything.
They might need to, or it might be that those are places where the town's investing in infrastructure. So, you know, thinking about, let me just go into Trader Lane here if I can. I've lost one of my scroll bars, but so Trader Lane is this green and this piece right here. So if we were to partner with the private sector to build Trader Lane, which would also involve building this extension of Wright Avenue, we've just created street frontage, you know, along, you know, maybe 1,000 feet here.
Yeah, that answers.
Yeah, so, you know, and then somebody might be coming in and building a piece of one of those side streets just to connect around or access a lot. And in a lot of cases, we've laid out streets in more or less the logical place where somebody would have done a driveway. And dimensionally, it's actually not all that different. And there's more nice stuff in the streetscape than you would build in the driveway, but it's similar.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else in the session? I see Gene's on. Other staff, anybody have any questions? I'd like to wrap up within the next 15 minutes so we can go. Number one, we've kept Matt longer than we told him we were going to keep him, but we got to get to some other stuff tonight as well. So Darren, I can't see the room right now. Does anybody? I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have my hand up, but if anyone else wants to go first, by all means.
Go for it.
Cool. So I have a lot of questions I'd like to ask you, Matt, but I'll catch you another time. But the one I want to ask tonight is, you said uses you left pretty open-ended and tried to be broad in your definitions of that. Tell us more about how you got to that decision and what that looks like, and how that's going.
Sure. Well, the first thing is in the sort of four to 4.5 zoning districts that would be covered by the form-based code. Allowed uses are already very broad. It's most commercial that's not industrial, and lots of different kinds of residential, and most, office, if you count that as a separate thing. So I guess the first part of the answer is we're already dealing with a pretty liberal, pretty big list of allowed uses. But there's some interesting things baked into that. Today in Taft Corners, we talk about residential density in terms of units per acre. The code doesn't do that. It says, here's the building you can build. Put however many apartments fit in that building, within reason and building code and that sort of thing. So density is being addressed in a completely different way. So that's an element of use. We did have some very general use categories in this code. We do have some, but our use table is about half a page, and it's mostly about what you can do downstairs versus upstairs. So there's more ground level commercial uses. There's office uses that can kind of go up into the upper floors, and at some point it's just residential or hospitality. So it's more about that than it is about the building form areas or sub-districts here at this point.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Dusty, it's Catherine here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
So Matt, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Question for you, and this is based a little bit on my experience in Jericho with the form-based code there, versus my knowledge of, say, Winooski, and then beginning to have a knowledge of your form-based code. But Jericho is pretty tight on the review, how the review happens of any sort of development. So it goes really through the traditional review process. Similar in standards, but it goes before the development review board for review, and there's still conditional use even, where I know Winooski has a much more staff focused review. So the subcommittee kind of review, and since the standards are laid out so clearly, you don't necessarily need as much time with your review boards. And I'm curious where yours fits in there. I was looking at it a little bit, and it seemed more like Willis or like Winooski.
Yes. So first off, our consultant is the same one. Jeff Farrell, who was the lead in Winooski, wrote this one. So there's a lot of similarities, which has actually been great because I can kind of Monday morning quarterback a lot of Eric's decisions in Winooski, and then I email and say, I noticed you were looking at street walls on this one. How did you approach that? Because I'm, just, thinking about when I might have to administer this. So this is an administrative process to the extent that it can be. We did identify that, for example, any platting activity, any subdivision activity is still going to have to go to the DRB. Our council advised long ago, just don't do platting stuff administratively. So setting things up will still happen at the DRB. And of course, appeals of any of those administrative decisions would go to DRB. But within that project review committee format and that meeting process, we've baked in a couple of things. The project review committee meeting, like Winooski's, is a public meeting that's announced. It's not a hearing, but it's a publicly accessible meeting. We are requiring a butter notification, and we're actually requiring it to adjacent property owners as well as anybody who lives in an adjacent property, because we know apartment residents and folks who have subdivision common land are often left out of the notification process as it exists today. And we wanted to correct that. So Planning Commission was really, they were okay with the idea of an administrative review process, but they wanted a lot of transparency on it. It's really, Winooski is a really easy website to navigate and read some of Eric Forwald's staff reports and application checklists to get kind of a preview of how we would do it in Williston. We are working with the consultant on a side project to develop a more comprehensive application form and checklist that would go with this process. So we really want for every element of the code for the applicant to say, I am meeting this by doing X. You can look on sheet Y to find that, and then a place for the administrator to say, I went and I checked and I saw that, and yes, it's there. So we really owe that, I think, to the community that, we're going to staff it in an open and transparent and careful, meticulous sort of way. That said, when our consultant raised the idea of administrative approval, we said, well, our DRB actually moves pretty quickly. And the select boards had some questions about that. And my feeling, just thinking about it, is if we ended up turning it into a one-night DRB hearing instead of a project review meeting, that would probably be okay and the code would still function just fine.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Not sure who's in the room tonight, Darren.
You actually had a few more people show up, but no one is raising their hand. Oh, one.
I missed the public meeting, the public speaking part. Could I be heard now or no?
Not at this point.
Okay.
I just have one.
So
I just have one little thing. The project review committee, that's not a legislative body. That's just like a subcommittee under the Planning Commission for transparency, you said?
It's a staff committee. So it's the zoning administrator, public works director, probably fire chief or designee, and any other town department that needs to be involved.
okay. Let's see where's my participants. Gene, I'm going to reach out to you one more time to see if there's anything you want to add or question on this. Josh?
I'm good. I don't have any questions or anything. I really very briefly liked the thought that it may take a really long time to build out, just because it underscores to us how what we're doing has ramifications for a very long time, and we should be very thoughtful about it. But I really like this premise, the code.
Thank you.
Hi there, Gene here. No, I'm actually, I was fascinated by what you were talking about. I'm actually here to listen and be supportive of any re-looking at zoning and uses of the fort.
Okay, thanks, Gene. So one more comment, and Darren and Catherine, I'd like to not put this note somewhere. I really like the term you used early on, Matt, when you're talking about buildings being solar ready. That addresses a lot of questions we've had about how to put it in place, how to be ready for it. And I think that's a really good phase one sort of approach to this. Mm-hmm. So that's guys, I want to see if we can capture that somehow and explore that a little bit. Matt, again, thank you very much. I think we're ready to move on at this point. I think this presentation was great, and it really I think it's very, very reflective of our own work that we've been not struggling with, but we work through, and I like the colors.
Thank you.
But it just makes it from a viewing point of view, it is a simple thing that makes it very quick to read. So I think sometimes we forget about the visual aspect when we're writing out regulations and zoning and subdivision and borders and buffers and all this, and just some of these tools are very effective.
Thanks.
So
that's good to hear. Thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about this stuff. We are committed to keeping the mytaftcorners.com website for probably a couple years going forward so that we can actually report project approvals under this eventually. So that website will stay up. And, you know, folks are welcome to reach out to me with follow-up questions. And as always, shout out to my entire staff. The amount of work that's gone into graphics and PowerPoints and making the colors look right. And I mean, Emily Heyman in my office will be giving a talk at the next regional planning conference about decision support, which is all about how to take a citizen planning commission through something as big and complicated as this, and all the grunt work that goes into preparing surveys. And, you know, we talk about it all the time. Planning commissions get about 40 hours a year of meeting time.
Whoa, guys, Darren, we're gonna have to start cutting back.
Hey, that's all on you, Dusty.
Nothing good happens after 9:30.
All right, Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with everything on this.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, let's find our agenda again, guys. I had it at one point in time.
It was
So let's get back into our planning session at this point.
And Dusty, I do want to ask, since we maybe incorrectly warned the meeting for 6:30, do you have a brief opportunity for public comments since folks who weren't here at 6 maybe wanted to speak? Just ask.
Sure, that would be fine. So Darren, if I again can't see the room, so.
Yep. Do you have someone?
Hi, yes, I'm Michael Peterson. I live at 77 Saxon Hill Road. Moved here approximately 4 years ago from New Jersey with my wife and my young child. And when we moved in, we understood that there was a commercial building going to be put up on, I forget, what is it, Red
Pine Circle.
Red whatever. And in the last couple months, Glavel Industries has started doing whatever they do. And it's basically ruined our quality of life. We have no more peace and quiet. Last Friday night at 2:00 in the morning, they're going gung-ho. If we didn't have air conditioning on, nobody in my house would have slept. I just find this totally unacceptable that this can go on in the town. I'm looking at all this planning going on, right down to where a sign can be put in a window, and I can have this put in my front yard. My house was there way before this building was built, way before any of this was even planned. And this is supposed to be some type of green development area. Come sit on my front porch and tell me what's green about this building. I got a pile of black crap out front that was in the rain today that I have a well there right in front of it that this is running into my well. They're poisoning my family. They give out toxic smell that they say they're going to contain. It smells like plastic. The noise pollution is 3:00 in the morning. Would you like that in your front yard? Would you like that in your front yard? Would you? I don't think anybody would. I don't. I'm dumbfounded at how this can happen, how a 24-hour operation can be given the okay to operate in a house that's been there for 60 years. How does this happen? 24-hour a day operation. 3:00 in the morning, they're out there with bucket trucks. Clang, clang, clang. Neil Villano lives half a mile away. He can hear it. It wakes him up at night. You know, I've been trying to be patient, and Friday night, I'm telling you, just peed me off to go downstairs at 2:00 in the morning. And the disrespect that I feel is beyond, it's beyond. We paid $640,000 for a house, and I can't sit on my front porch. $18,000 a year in taxes. My well's getting poisoned. My air's getting poisoned. I don't know how you people feel. I just can't fathom how it happened. I don't know. You know, if I moved in, if I built my house after that was there, it's on me. It's on me. This is on them. This is on whoever allowed that to happen. I'm not stopping here. I'm going after them. I want this done. You come over and you look at those black piles. I took pictures today. I have them on my phone. That rain out there, those piles, that crap is running everywhere. My well is 200, 300 feet away. 300 feet deep. Where's that going? Going in my well. I got a 9-year-old boy running around. I got plastic smell coming out of that plant. He says, there's no plastic in it. I said, as far as I know, Ron or Rob, whatever his name is, if you step in dog S, there's probably dog S around, right? You smell it? Well, I smell plastic all the time. So it means to me they're burning plastic. You know, my wife, we're looking at it. Why should we have to move? You know?
Sir, thank you very much for bringing this to us, sir. I think at this stage, Catherine, is this something that the office can help this gentleman find the next step forward?
Sure, yeah. I would encourage you to contact the planning office, or if you want to leave with Darren your information, we can reach out to you directly and follow up with you.
Okay.
Happy to chat more about that.
Wrong. It's completely wrong. You know,
We are dealing that this is an industrial park. So industrial uses are allowed. Now, the quality of life issue is something that can be brought up, but that is,
you know, I'm in a velodrome. It's their building, the front of my house. Everything that goes on echoes back and forth. How do you run on that road every day?
Not anymore
Not
for the
anymore.
same reason.
So let's Patty.
I run on
Okay.
Sleepy Hollow.
Okay, but she used to run in front of my house every day, and she doesn't run there now because of that plant.
So let's work with staff to find the avenue forward. You know, it is an industrial park. It is the usage that was requested is industrial use. If it causes contamination, that's something that especially if it's well water contamination, that's I believe that's a state function. So let's get you in a place where your concerns can be heard.
You know, the 24-hour operation, I don't know. You know, how is that possible? How is 24-hour bucket equipment operation in my front yard allowable? It's beyond, it's, you know, I was trying to be reasonable, you know, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever, but 3 o'clock in the morning, come on. Whether it's industrial, I'm right there.
Mr. Peters, say again, the town doesn't have the ability to regulate noise at that level yet. We can pass regulations that do that, either at ordinance level or possibly zoning level, but we don't have those.
We had spoken about that at a
right, yeah,
at a town meeting, at a
select board meeting. Yeah, so I know that that's potentially in the works. I do know that Act 250 has some restrictions on their operations and their noise impact, so that could be another avenue.
It's a huge impact.
Yeah,
you know, it's a huge impact. It's
so I think we should probably, you know, like Catherine said, sit down with staff and figure out what the avenues are for you to get the issue addressed, because there are avenues.
You know, because last week they did nothing all week. I'm in and out of my house all day. They did nothing all week. Friday night at midnight, they decide to work like gangbusters, and they drive around with these forks on the front of the machine. Every time it hits a bump, clang. It's you know, you couldn't try to make more noise if you wanted to. You know, ask Neil. You know, I don't know if anybody here knows Neil. Neil was at a meeting. I'm going to get my neighbors.
I think the smell is better though, because
but they haven't been doing as much.
Okay.
It doesn't
so we
anymore.
Right, but we really, this isn't a place where we can regulate this, sir. I mean, at this point, it's an existing industrial use. We appreciate the impact it's having to you. So let's find the right way to get you to be heard where it might have an effect. And I think the staff that's a great thing for staff to work with you on. Darren, Catherine can follow up. And you know, the other side of this, it may not help you immediately right now, but we're in the process of beginning to look at zoning and subdivision regulations and, you know, uses and so forth. So this might be a good takeaway for us to include in our reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you know, like I said, basically the poisoning of my groundwater is what I'm really worried about right now. You know, it's my well is right there. I took pictures. If you want to see on my phone, you can see the picture in the backdrop of my well right there. You know, when this rained today, every time it rains, I lay there and I go, am I being poisoned?
Okay.
Can I speak to the planning commission?
Go ahead.
Justin? This is not from the planning commission, just from me personally. You should definitely contact the state if you're concerned about your well. They will come out and test it for you. or you can have a local engineer test it.
Okay.
That would be the route I would take if it were me.
Okay.
All right. That's just me speaking, not the planning commission. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you for bringing it. Okay. So next on our list is getting into some of the planning discussion. Let's hold on that, because let's knock off a couple of other. Let's change the agenda for a minute. Let's get rid of the minutes and the PC operating procedures, unless those are going to be lengthy. Any issues with getting those approved?
No.
Commissioners?
You want a motion on the minutes?
I want a motion on the minutes for July 14th, whatever's on in front of us.
Move we approve the minutes for July 14th.
I'll second.
Moved by Shu, seconded by Patty. Anybody have any comments or questions or adjustments to the minutes from 7/14? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes pass
5-0.
5-0. PC operating procedures. No, we took it away for folks to take a look at. Darren sent us out a version with some updates to it. Anyone have any comments or additional corrections, changes that they want to offer?
I'll just say that I think we should keep it because of what David Raphael said last time, that the word
Keep what?
isn't it? Keep G, which says keep first sentence except written information presented to the commission, but also keep, I want to keep not strike, documentary evidence shall be marked by the chairperson or clerk in order of presentation, and a record shall be maintained of what has been admitted and which party offered each document. I think that should stay. That's my comment.
Why is that? We don't do it.
Oh, well, if we accept letters from the public, or just, that last person that came to us just now, if we want to document his name or share it with staff, we can say, the date, who it was. I think
It's in the minutes.
documentation is important to me because I worked in medicine. What's documented is fact. That's why. And who said it is fact.
Okay, we'll take it off the table. I'm not going to agree to that at this point. So we'll take it off and put it on for another evening where we can get into it. So I think we have some miscommunication on this a little bit and misunderstanding. So let's not make it be a challenge for the night. We'll leave them as written for the time being, and we can review them again when we have a little more time. Moving on, we're back, I should say, to the planning discussion. What do we have in front of us, Darren, Catherine, and Sharon? What did you guys have thoughts on how you wanted to approach this? We want to go to Josh and get an update on what we wanted to do with the work groups.
The last time we talked, there was a question of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, go ahead, Darren. You continue.
There was discussion about, wanting to know the status of the work groups and wanting to figure out, how some of those were going to get started. I do know Josh has some updates, but I just want to frame, this is why we put that on the agenda, that this was a follow-up session. But we didn't necessarily have a specific approach that staff wanted to take. This is the Planning Commission's work plan and work groups. So we'll look to you first. We can jump in with suggestions, but
okay.
I turn to Josh.
Yeah, so very quickly, what I have done is I've reached out to two of the particular work groups that were of my interest, that being the Fort Ethan Allen one and the 2024 town plan, because that's where I got the most interest from the other committees and commissions and boards and everything. And where we are right now is we're in a time period where I just told everyone or rather suggested to everyone, that we familiarize ourselves with what the current conditions are, whether it be 40th and Allen zoning or what the previous town plan looked like. And there's been some chatter back and forth about, suggestions, like I think in the 2024 plan, we need X, Y, Z, which is great. But what I'm having everyone do first is just read and familiarize themselves with the original documents and the facts on the ground so they can sort of know where we're starting from. And that's where the other groups, since I'm not the point person personally, I don't know where those stand. There's obviously going to be a little bit, I don't have the Excel in front of me right now, but whichever one Ned was the point person for, obviously we're going to have to figure something out there.
That was housing.
Yeah, I want to say it was affordable, and I'm not just like inclusionary zoning. I want to say was that one,
Correct.
the one related to that. So we'll have to figure out which commissioners are going to be which things still. That's still sort of a point to resolve, but I've got those two groups going, and there was interest. They did write, like I said, everyone wrote back immediately and had all sorts of ideas. And I just said, let's make sure we know what the facts are on the ground. And I said, let's come back in 2 weeks, which would be right before the next meeting. So then I can report. Everyone has read the official documents that are currently in place, and here's sort of what our next step is. I want to do it sort of incrementally like that, so it's not too much for people to chew all at once.
Catherine, this is your first swing at our approach on this. Do you have any thoughts or any suggestions that we can maybe, approach this, additional tools that we can use?
So when you say your group that you're working with, these are other boards and committees, you're talking to chairs?
So what we did, I probably should back up. Back when we started this idea, we reached out to the chairs and vice chairs of all the other town boards and committees and commissions and relevant things, and said, could you give us names of people? Like, go to your next meeting and say, who wants to be involved in this? And so when I say a working group, what I mean are the persons from those committees who said, I would like to be part of the process for Ethan Allen rezoning, or I would like to be part of the process for the 2024 town plan. And the other ones are like inclusionary zoning, who's interested in that. And I think the Saxon Hill rezoning. And these are all members of each committee who had volunteered. These aren't the chairs and vice chairs. And since I'm on a different computer, I don't have the Excel, but what I laid out this sort of progression of how things would go, and members of the committees would form a work group, and then the work group would report back to the relevant committee. So if it's, say, something very energy specific, that someone from energy was in a working group, they would then say, we really want this included in the 2024 town plan, say. And then they would go to the energy committee, and the energy committee as a whole would say, well, golly gee, that's fantastic. And then they would eventually report to in a public hearing in the usual process for their approvals and recommendations. Then it would go to the PC. And so we would get it as official energy committee recommendation. And this was in distinction to the former process where we would do a town plan or a development or what have you, and then sort of solicit from these committees and commissions almost not after the fact, but much later on in the process. So they say, well, we like what you did, I guess, and we'll give it an official thumbs up, but we would have preferred that you'd put in X, Y, Z, but it's too late at that point. So this was an idea to get interested persons who would then funnel things up to the relevant committees and then come to the PC. So by the time it got to that point, every stakeholder, interested party would have been able to say their piece, and we'd get a broader diversity of opinion, basically. And so the reason I started with, as I said, the two particular committees with facts on the ground is because I didn't want to assume that people had, already read the 2016 plan or knew exactly what the ins and outs of for Ethan Allen zoning were and what the limitations were. That is to say, well, it's the reason it was zoned this way is because in 1986, when they did the last plan, here's what sewer capacity was, and just to know those sort of things going into it. I hope that sort of answers what your general question was.
It does. I
Okay.
think that's a great approach. definitely bringing interested parties in earlier in the process, your experts that are on your other boards and committees makes tons of sense. I think that's super. I guess my only other comment would be just staff is here to help with that process too. And I know the initial, if I remember correctly, the initial thought was that let the planning commission do your work and staff doesn't have to be involved in every little bit of the process, which is true, but we are happy to chime in. And, if you feel like there needs to be a little bit more of an education piece for people understanding more of a background of something, feel free to reach out to us. And, in some cases it could be public works staff or somebody on, like Allie from the Parks Department. So yeah, feel free to call on us.
Right. And that's exactly why we're starting, like I said, with initial conditions. So if they have any questions of, hey, why is the zoning this, or why the street width have to be such and such, I can say, okay, here's an informed person. So they don't recommend, well, we should do this. And if you have a prior knowledge, you know how infeasible that is, for example.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'll add, just keep us in the loop as much as you can, even if we're not responding to every email or at every meeting. We can try to follow where these working groups are at and chime in, especially if there's sort of this outstanding question of, well, why is this way? Or you start going in a certain direction. We might be able to jump in and say, jump in at an appropriate point. So yeah, we're there, even if we're not active.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the working group report.
Okay. So I have to admit I'm at a loss right now as to what we can roll on, if we can roll on anything else tonight.
So
go ahead, Darren.
We put in your packet all the materials you've been working with, the work plan, the collaboration groups, as well as the draft zoning regulations. So 2 ways you could go. One, you could talk about assigning PC members to these other working groups that Josh isn't a part of, and start the process going with, background and forming those groups, getting those conversations going. We also had that set of zoning regulations that was just updates, housekeeping things that don't really rely on any sort of planning process. We just needed to get some stuff done. So we've had that waiting in the wings for whenever the planning commission wants to start the official public hearing process. So once you give us the thumbs up, we'll start that process. So that's your options in front of you, or you can do none of the above. You can ask the chair.
Dusty, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I'm the newbie, so I have a lot to learn, but I just wondered, this is just from an angle coming from the different groups. Just say, for example, energy. Somebody on the energy group, their wish list might be, okay, a company wants to come to town, they come up with some idea or standard that there'll be 3 EV stations. If there's 400 employees, you got to have at least 3 EV stations, and they just throw this out, or say 10% of a company's roof has to be solar the first year, and after the 3rd year it has to be 50%. If they just come and throw these wish list ideas, then it's up to us in zoning, right, to actually write the code or the standard for what the groups are bringing to us. Am I understanding that correctly?
Not completely.
Okay.
I mean, it isn't that prescriptive. I mean, in some cases we may be writing it, but really this push is to get, it's not just a random, hey, this sounds like a neat idea. It really is having folks that are invested in this do the work. The Energy Committee actually wrote the last, much of the energy code that we have. So it isn't that we're just looking for ideas. We're actually looking for people to do the work and come up with the right code. They're the ones that and energy is a good example. They're the ones that are doing the research and the investigation, and they have the understanding. Let them prescribe. We're not energy experts. If anybody at the table says that they're an energy expert, we can have another discussion about that. But we can.
This is helpful because
we want to use the experts to be able to, the other experts to be able to provide us information. Now, the other side of this, and that is, the downside is that the Planning Commission, we hopefully will be able to just accept what is submitted to us, but it does have to go through us. So we may see something that we just don't agree with, we don't feel is appropriate. And that's the other side of a submission. So it's part of the checks and balance. We're getting people to view it. We're getting them to present it to the public in their groups. And then it comes to the commission. We also will get additional public input. Staff is going to be part of this all the way, because staff also supports the other group. So it really is a from a purely selfish perspective, it's a way to get some other people to do some of the work that we've always had to do. And by getting some of the others to do it, we're getting a greater level of input into the formation of the rules and regulations and so forth.
Got it. So, Dusty, one other thing. Can I be on the Saxon Hill master plan and anything with zoning? Even if it's Saxon Hill, that's the only thing I know because I've run on it for 6 years.
Talk to Josh.
Okay.
Josh is managing the group.
Yeah, Darren, could you share that? I don't have it on this computer. Could you share the Excel of who's on? Yeah, thank you. Who's on which one? There you go. So, Patty, if you can see it, or if you have the document. This is what.
Thought having Tom Yendo, at least I'd have someone who can keep me straight with subdivision regulations. Since I'm a newbie, I'd like to be on a committee with somebody else that's also on the planning commission. So that's why I picked.
Right. Yeah, that makes okay. Yeah, that makes all the sense. And like I said, now that we've got that up, you can see that we are going to need to make a change in the exclusionary zoning one. We can add. I didn't add myself to the 2024 town plan, but I've taken that one. So we've got, yeah, you can take the question mark off that, and then, yep. And we had talked earlier how ETC next zoning is sort of in limbo for a bit. And then the two things related to that, but then we still need someone for the allowable conditional uses, performance standards, inclusionary zoning.
And I do want to clarify again, the ETC next is in limbo in the sense that we can't adopt higher density zoning yet, but all of the other work, the design work, the business design control overlay, the process, that can be done at any point.
Yes, yeah, I know, agreed. I was just
just making sure that's clear.
And then Darren, could you also, if you've got it put up just for everyone's benefits, we can see it again, the workflow one, if you have that one available.
You have that. Yeah, I was going to just, you were talking about it, but I didn't want to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So those who haven't seen it yet, you can just tab. There we go. Just full screen, and then just hit the down arrow so it looks like I did this magical presentation. Yeah. So we start the planning commission. Someone from PC leadership, or as you had just said, Darren and Catherine, the community development staff as appropriate. We send requests for input on work plan line item. So for example, inclusionary zoning. And then next step, boop, the relevant board or commission sends interested people, whoever they may be, and you saw that other Excel, you saw the names. Then interested members from both. That's your work group. Then the work group and the PC leadership or community development staff. If it's an overall thing, the PC leadership here is me, because I'll be the sort of go-to person of, oh, this work group needs this, they need that. And then if necessary or appropriate, again, community development staff will give that background or whatever we need. Then we go back up, boop. Assistants check in. Then at that point, ideally, they'll have some sort of, the group will have some sort of idea in answering the charge. If the charge was, say, is inclusionary zoning a good idea? Yep, there we go. And the work group says, why say, yes, it is. And it happened to be, let's just the energy committee thinks this is a fantastic idea, or the affordable housing group, they think this is a great idea. They go to that particular body and it's a public hearing on a proposal. Again, if it is an actual bona fide proposal. So then there is that level of oversight and public involvement. So people can come to a warned meeting of a board or commission that says, here is what we're going to tell the PC. People can say, wow, that's just great. Meanwhile, whichever PC member is on the group tells the planning commission this is happening. Like, the energy committee will be vetting this at this public hearing, and I will be there as relevant member. And then, again, if necessary, the proposal for new regulation will be carried up, as it were, if it passes, by the chair, an appropriate person, and just saying, the energy committee is proposing to you this regulatory change or this zoning change or whatever you like. The planning commission, of course, will know this well ahead of time, but now it's official. We're having ourselves a warned public hearing or series if necessary. And then at that point, boop, public hearings, proposal for new regulation as appropriate goes to the Essex Select Board, where of course they will hold the various public hearings or be part of the process as necessary. So there's three different places where the public themselves can be directly involved. And like I said, the reason we like this process is because no one will be surprised at any point. It'll be the third time someone has seen something. It won't be what has happened before in some instances where a zoner, sorry, the air conditioner just turned on here, where another board or commission will say, well, okay, that's good. Well, if this is what you're doing, it's okay. But we would have liked to have been involved earlier. This is the earlier. So there is the workflow document. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, just ask Justin.
Go ahead, Patty.
Josh. Oh, yeah. Actually, it's a question for Josh, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh. Yeah, I'm following you. I just, my concern is, it's just a little flag, red flag, is how can we as a group, or maybe I could do it somehow, in coordination with staff, come up with a website to advertise, to all the committees and to the public that all these committees are going to be having these meetings that the public is welcome to. Please come. And if they can't, because a lot of these meetings are during the day when people are working, I want us to have, I'm suggesting we have some kind of website like that Williston guy that was here that said, anybody can type in their ideas. And if it's me that goes to the staff location and looks at the website every day or once a week to collect facts, I'd be willing to do that and steer them.
Let me take this one, Josh.
Okay.
Patty, one of the things is we're trying to build this as we go. So we're not telling the other committees how to do their work. We're not telling other commissions how to do their work. We're not telling them how to do public meetings. We're not telling them how to include people. They already do that. I mean, we're giving them an opportunity. We're giving the public an opportunity that already exists. And we're letting this process grow as we go through this. So this is our first time. And if we try to make it too complicated, my fear is that if we try to make it too complicated, too detailed, too process oriented, we won't ever get through anything. So we're really looking for the committees, zoning, energy, housing, to incorporate these asks into their normal workflow, their normal processes. We can always make adjustments as we go. We can always make adjustments as we get through things to find out if there were gaps in the process. But we're not really telling energy or zoning or housing how they need to conduct their business. And I think that's one of the things we're trying not to tell them what to do. We're asking for their help. We're not telling them how to work. So I
just was saying, because some of the meetings I want to go to are 8 a.m. like that. Is it economic development? you know, if you work, you know, you can't, as a public person, forget planning commission. I'm talking as an individual public person. You know, what if these people can't go? That I was just suggesting a way to work with staff to help funnel people, not to tell them what to do, but just to funnel more public so they attend.
But even that is apt to be telling them what to do. So let's let them have those ideas. So we're not controlling them, and that's a piece where we're trying to list them as a collaborative team member, not as a somebody who does our bidding, right? So we're really looking to collaborate with them in their workflow and their processes. And let's see what's broken as we go through this, and where there are opportunities to improve as we go through. Josh, anything else?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. And I would just second what you said, that for some of these groups, there isn't anything for the public to see yet, because we've just, again, asked for their help, and we've got a work group that'll be going. And before anything filters up, there's nothing to be done, because we're not making them do anything. They may not have anything to say. They may say, what you're doing is just spiffy, and we have no changes to make whatsoever. We don't know.
Okay. So, folks, for tonight, we're coming up on 8. It sort of feels like a new kickoff since Patty's just come on board. It's new. It's a new process, and we want to get you into this as well. I guess I'd like to suggest to the commissioners and staff that we don't take any action tonight other than what Josh has already started. And you'll have a report for the next round. And I would actually like to say we use the next planning meeting to kick off the round of to turn staff loose on their list of things, and use that as sort of the new kickoff for our planning process. That's my suggestion.
Dusty, when you say turn staff loose on our list of things, do you mean the zoning updates, or more of this these planning projects, or both?
The list that you just asked us, you said you wanted to get the go ahead to start on something. You want the commission to say, do this.
It's to zoning. Yep. Okay.
I think we get those cleaned up. I mean, if we target the next meeting to actually address them and sign off, or whatever you need from us, and we can use the update from Josh at that point to actually maybe get the collaborative group sessions rolling, and get things moving and actually take some steps.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions. I'm a newbie. I have so many questions.
Tom, how does that sound for you? Or do you want to tackle anything this evening? Tom?
Me? No, I'm good.
Shoot.
Yeah, I'm a little chopping at the bit. I think we should get going on the work groups. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Patty, I know there's a lot coming at you this evening. Does this proposal to feel okay at this stage to get the work groups fired up again, and then tackle the
A lot of my questions, Dusty. Thank you.
Okay. Who did I miss? Me, Josh. I think we're on the same page with this.
Yeah, no, we are. I'm like I said, I'm interested to see what people say after having reviewed the initial conditions. Like I have gotten, like I said, a lot of input, and I think we should do this. I think we should do that. And they're interesting suggestions. I just really want to know that everyone is squared away with what's going on right now first. That's all. But yeah, I think we're gonna do some interesting things with some of these.
So, Catherine, Darren, Sharon, I know Sharon's virtual, Catherine's virtual. Does this feel reasonable at this point? I mean, do you want to pull anything out and address it this evening?
No, I think just a reminder that if we do bump it, we'll have more time to review the info I was telling you about from Mr. Parkinson.
I'm on board. Sounds like a good next step.
Okay. Then, since we've covered everything else, is there other business that staff wants to present to us?
I would like to just remind you that, I can't remember if I sent you a PC email, but I did, put Marcel Leclerc is coming in for an added, storage building on 220 Colchester Road. So he's missed the first meeting in August. Anyhow, once I get a chance to look at it, I guess I'm gonna try to put it on consent if I feel it meets that criteria. Otherwise, I might slide it on the second meeting, because we've missed the first meeting in August. So I think it's gonna be relatively easy, but I'll feel better about it once I, as I said, I review it. So I wanted to give you a heads up about that coming down the road. I was gonna go a different direction, but since we want to wrap up, I think that's a good alternative.
Okay. Darren,
Nothing for me. Sounds like we've got
did you not have anything?
Dusty, quiet.
Sorry. All right. With that in mind,
I haven't spent too much time in meetings.
I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Shu and Josh. All those in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye.